What's up, Internet? You're tuning episode 132 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where three best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford,
Hello, hello.
and Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Welcome back, boys. Another PlayStation-centric week.
Yeah, I've been trying to get us away from PlayStation, but Pete is so much of a Sony pony that we have to talk about it every week.
Oh, really? You're gonna play that
It's,
card?
you know,
Interesting. Okay.
I
Not
just
my
think
fault.
Here, I
Sony keep
thought-
having drama, really, right?
I thought he's gonna come out here and be like, they just keep bringing all this big news. We've had, they won't stop.
I don't think they want any of this
No,
news
that-
out
yeah.
here,
They won't
right?
stop
I don't-
stepping on rakes, right? But yeah, you had to make it a drive by at my expense, which I appreciate that. That's just good radio.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're talking about something I actually can talk about sometimes. Because whenever it's big time for a big Xbox chat, I'll just sit here like twiddling my thumbs, going, I don't know, man. All I can
You're
do
not
is
excited about
speculate.
juicy Xbox Elite?
Yeah, I know. Max can't read. Steve, isn't that crazy?
All I can do is pictures.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we have any pictures, but we do have a lot of stuff to read today. So hopefully Steve can translate it for you, because this is if you're not a listener of the Steam Deck podcast, this is going to be feeling like a Steam Deck podcast this week, I think, where we're going to read a bunch of flops and different letter combinations and then
Mhm.
numbers in front of hertz, and Steve will tell us what it all means.
Yeah.
But the PS5 Pro has seemingly had its specs leak. And there's been a ton of conversation as folks pick it apart and kind of look at what exactly the changes are under the hood here. And, we start to kind of have those conversations of, what is this thing going to cost? Is it worth an upgrade right now? Is this a thing that people are even really looking for? A lot of questions to be. Steve's already answering all of them. If you're an audio listener, you won't know his secret answers. But if you're on YouTube, hey, there you go. I don't know who's to say. So, Steve, why don't you, before we offer our opinions, why don't you just walk us through kind of the highlights of what we know, what we think we know about the hardware right now?
Yeah, so this is a definitive leak. This is true. There's no way it's not. It originally came from Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming, who leaked the PlayStation Portal. He's been talking about the PS5 Pro targeting a holiday 2024 release for a while. But this has now been leaked from PlayStation's DevNet portal, which is for third-party development partners. And they've been pushing this out this week to all of their development partners, say this is what we're releasing this year. So get ready, get your games ready. This is what you've kind of got to play with. And they did the same thing back in March 2016 with the PS4K or PS4.5, which ultimately became the PS4 Pro. This one's codenamed Trinity, apparently, and Sony's now launching an investigation into how it leaked. They're not going to find it. It's, you go through hundreds of third-party developers to find out which one took a photo on their phone to send to a reporter. You're just not going to find anything. But raw specs, it looks solid on paper, right? You've got an 8-core, 16-thread Zen 2 at 3.5 or 3.85 gigahertz. There's a now 10% boost mode to the CPU on the PS5 Pro. They looks like they're switching to RDNA 3 architecture versus RDNA 2, which gives us 60 CUDA cores versus 36, and 33.5 teraflops versus 10 teraflops at a similar gigahertz, 2.18 to 2.23. The memory is 16 gigabytes at 18 gigabits per second versus 14 gigabits per second. It's faster. But somehow Sony are now saying to developers that there is more memory available for the games, 13.7 gigabytes versus the 12.5 gigabytes on the PlayStation 5. They're not saying how they've done it and how they've kind of clawed that back from the system. Whether we'll see an update to the PS5 to do a similar thing is yet to be seen. But the memory interface is, again, a little bit faster. It's 256-bit, the same as the PS5, but the PS5 Pros is 576 gigabits per second versus 448 gigabits per second. And we can break down what all of this means in a little bit. This is from most of what we're going to be talking about is from Richard Ledbetter, Digital Foundry. He did a great analysis. We'll post a link to that in the description.
God bless Digital Foundry for just making it simple for the rest of
Making
us,
it
huh?
Yeah.
easier. Yeah, I'm glad they got that out today, and not tomorrow for us, so we could talk
God,
about it.
God bless them,
Hmm.
doing the Lord's work.
So
So
here, I think the headline is that the CPU basically is the same. It's the exact same CPU, but they're putting the ability to basically overclock it by 10% in there for developers, and developers can choose to do that. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a boost mode like there is on the PS4 Pro in order to do that. And it does mean that games that activate that 10% speed increase will see a 1.5% decrease on the GPU side because it shares, it's obviously on the same system on a chip. So it draws some power from the GPU to funnel it to the CPU. And unfortunately, it seems like the CPU is going to remain the bottleneck this generation. And any games that are CPU limited, which are probably the majority of games, at least the open world ones, for example, they're
Mhm.
bringing in a lot of assets, a lot of things going on. Any game that's limited to 30 FPS that you maybe expected to get to 60 FPS or beyond, you're going to be disappointed with the PS5 Pro.
I know we're gonna get to this in a second, but this specific point, I'm gonna pop this in the air for a little bit later on the shelf. What's the point then? What is the point? Now let's continue.
yeah, I mean that's kind of my initial read too, right? Is like I think you look back at in 2016, right, and the release of the PS4 Pro, and I think there was an argument to be made then, right? That like, who's this for? Is this really something that we need, or is this a thing that they're doing to artificially extend the console generation, or is this kind of just like a premium product that's going to appeal to who it's going to appeal to, right? Um, there was I think there was a lot of legitimate conversation at that point about like what is really the need of this device when a lot of people don't have 4K TVs or what have you, right? But you saw that decision make sense over time, right? Where like 4K became more common, budget 4K TVs became an option, right? And like a lot of people, I think benefited from that half gen refresh, and it came at a point, where it felt like the PS4 had been around and had been really well established by the time that came out, right? Or at least to some degree, right? I think you look at the PS5 and it's just been such a different story, right? Like
Mhm.
availability's been a different thing. We have had multiple conversations about how, like they're kind of still getting their ducks in a row when it comes to like teeing up major software releases and everything. It's just like it doesn't feel like, you know, I don't know, like I recognize that we probably are about halfway through the console's life cycle, right? But I think as a marketing beat, it doesn't quite feel like we've hit that point.
So marketing is sort of the point that I've been thinking about when I've been thinking about this is that with the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, by the time the PS4 Pro came out, we have multiple PlayStation owned games that were 1080p 30 FPS, and then there was a very easy sell there of this thing lets you play these games at 4K or at 60 FPS. There are boost modes. There are there's an obvious merit to this. And even with the PS5, you saw a lot of those games that were still running at 30 FPS in 4K on the PS4 Pro were now running at 4K 60 FPS. Things like God of War, things like Spider-Man Remastered, stuff like that. Now we're coming into the PS5 Pro. The PS4 was advertised as 4K, 8K 120 FPS. We haven't really seen that come out in any way.
We got
It
one
says it
game, The Tourist, that was 8K 120
But even
FPS.
brilliant.
so, right?
Okay.
Like there aren't people who really have that display format,
No,
right?
no, 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 definitely not. But that's a top end promise, right? That's the top end promise of it. It's capable of doing this. A
Sure.
game hasn't come out and done that now, but most of the games, especially the sort of the big PlayStation games, are currently 4K 60 FPS. And I'm sure there
Well, they're
are.
they're not really. They're targeting 4K, but they might have dynamic resolution. They might be running at
Yeah, of course,
1440p in order to hit those higher frame rates.
but it's
So
something
they
they
look.
advertise, right? They
It is
advertise
some.
that as
It,
that. So if they were to, if
that's
they
the
were, to,
target. That was the target for the PS5, and I do think
yeah,
it struggled since launch to hit that target.
yeah.
I think
I just don't think we've
any
had a game
game.
that's better than any of the year. Demon Souls and Returnal are two of the best looking games on the system. They run at like a locked 60 FPS. They look incredible. There's so much going on there. There's so much particle effects. They felt like I was like, oh, this is next gen. This feels like it's
Mhm.
doing something that my PC wasn't doing. However, now we're sort of a few years down the line. Most of the games that are, most of those games are on PC now, and in some ways they can be improved. And even things like Ratchet and Clank that we were told this can only work on the PS4, the PS5. This can only work on here because of this special SSD. They work on PC, and they've sort of spent all of their marketing points for the PS5 now. I'm struggling to see how they come out with a PS5 Pro and they say, "Oh, this runs at 60 FPS." Already supposed to have done. Oh, it runs at 4K. Already supposed to have done. Where do they? Oh, it runs at 128K. Yeah, you're already supposed to have done that. So where? I just don't understand how they market this.
Yeah, and I think that's part of my question, right? Is like, you brought up the PS4 Pro launch and that there were games that you could look at and see that they would have, a definitive performance increase. And I mean, like, I'm sure that will literally be true, right? Like, I mean, Steve's looking at looking at Steve's numbers here, right? Like, it looks like we can expect right, this 10% increase or something like that. And it's like, it's not to say that that is nothing. It's like it's fine for them to iterate on the product. Like we've seen that with the difference between like the Steam Deck and the OLED Steam Deck, right? Where it's like that isn't quite a refresh of that console. It's more just like this is a better version and it runs a little bit better and it's a little bit beefier. But I think the pro moniker here is kind of, I feel like you established what that meant with the PS4 Pro as it being this kind of like half gen, refresh step forward, whatever type thing. And, Max brought up those examples of games that were already out. I mean, I think for me, the big thing was like Spider-Man was a new game that year, right? Or maybe the next year. And that was a game that was a big marquee title that they had a lot of marketing behind. And there was a real clear value prop there of like, yeah, like Spider-Man will look and run just fine on your base launch PS4. You're not going to have any problems playing that in 1080p or whatever. But if you want to play it in 4K, you want to take advantage of the dynamic resolution, you want to be able to hit 60 FPS with it and like really get the full weight of what this game has to offer, it looks better on PS4 Pro. And like that was, I think for a lot of people, that was enough to be like, yeah, cool, right? Like, why not? I like my PS4. I'm happy to get an upgrade. Like, I bit on the special edition console that they did because I'm a big Spider-Man fan. And I was like, whatever, right? Like, I may as well. And for me with this, it's like, I mean, for 10%, no, like that's nothing. It's like if I was buying a PS5 now for the first time, yeah, absolutely. I'd maybe spend a little bit more to get the
Oh,
slightly
it
better
depends if
version,
it's a little bit more or
and that's the
a
question.
lot bit more. We don't know that. But I think it's worth not getting ahead of ourselves. Yeah, the
Sure.
CPU is the headline. It's pretty much
Disagree.
it's the exact same thing, and it
Max is
has
like, "I
that
wanna
boost
get ahead
mode.
of ourselves, Steve.
I
Let's
wanna.
get ahead."
I'm
But
starting to hate
everything
train now.
everything else has changed, and I do think as we get deeper and deeper into the generation, we're probably gonna see what happened in the last gen, where games are more ambitious, they wanna do more things, especially with stuff like Unreal Engine 5 games.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably going to become more and more GPU limited as well as CPU limited. And the GPU seems to be where they've really kind of beefed things up. It looks like they're switching from RDNA 2 to RDNA 3. Sony has said in the developer disclosures that that's going to be a boost in gaming applications of around 45%, which is,
That's
a
big.
significant
Right.
boost. Yeah. And they're also going to see a 28% boost in bandwidth on the memory feeding that GPU. And they've also looked at some other features. They've beefed up the audio engine. It's now 35% faster than the PS5. So it can do things like the 3D audio a little bit quicker. So maybe games that didn't feature that or what wasn't quite as good as they wanted it to be can implement that. And they've introduced hardware-based variable rate shading, which was on the Series X and the Series S, but it wasn't available on the PS5. And all of this will allow them to just kind of, I guess, essentially output games at a higher resolution. When you combine that with something else that they're looking at doing, which is basically bringing DLSS or their version of DLSS, which they're calling PlayStation Spectral Resolution or PSSR, to PlayStation, to a home console for the first time. We've seen FSR, but we've not seen anything that's machine learning based. And in order to do this, they've seemingly created their own custom machine learning silicon for the PS5 Pro. in the same way that they did with the checkerboard hardware that was found in the PS4 Pro. And not only that, this only is going to use a 250 megabyte memory footprint in game, so it's negligible for developers, and that they can backport it to any of the existing games on the platform if they want to.
That's
It doesn't
really
have to be rebuilt on the new SDK. They can just add this feature in if they want to, which should make games run at that high resolution. And Tom Henderson said that they're targeting 120 hertz at 4K resolution, and that's what they're wanting games to hit with the PS5 Pro.
so talk to
That'd
me
be on the
about this,
box.
Steve, because you said let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? Here are all these other features, 45% increase on the GPU. That's obviously pretty significant. This, DLSSR style upscaling is like definitely something that we've talked a lot about what the kind of long-reaching applications of that can be, and that could really be something that we'll see developers take more advantage of as we move forward here. So why is your read on it still that it's not worth it then? If it's all these things are a pretty significant update, is that CPU, throttling the issue? Like all these games were guaranteed to hit that 4K 60, is that the differentiator for you, or is it something else?
I think for me, 120 hertz has never been that important in games, that multiplayer games. I think it is, but um, I I have never had an issue with a game running at 1440p on a 4K display and it looking absolutely fine. I think the PSSR stuff is very interesting, and I do think as we get deeper and deeper into the generation, it could be more important. It is also worth noting that they have said that ray tracing is going to be improved, and it's going to be 2 to 4 times faster to process ray tracing. It's not going to be 2 to 4 times faster in terms of frame rate on the games, but it seemingly is that because we're using RDNA 3 instead of RDNA 2 that it's
Yeah.
faster. That combined with the DLSS stuff, I think could mean we'll see more ray tracing implemented in more games at high resolution. But I don't know. I think for me, that's probably been one of the parts of the PS5 that I've been most disappointed with, is that ray tracing's just been a bit lackluster. It was a really high promise at the beginning of the generation. I think because we had the NVIDIA 3 series cards coming out at that time, um, that really ray tracing was hot on everyone's mind, and AMD, I think, overpromised and under delivered on the ray tracing in both the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. I could see that the PS5 Pro would bring that, but I don't know. It's a cost. I think it's a cost reward thing that people need to kind of weigh up. For me, I think having a game look a little bit sharper, run a little bit higher frame rate is just not going to be worth the upgrade fee for me. I think if I was going to do that, I would probably do what Max did and build a PC and play the PlayStation games that they're releasing on PC there anyway. Um, I don't know that everyone will want to do that, and I'm sure there are people that will want to buy a PS5 Pro. And I'm also sure that this will probably lead to a price reduction in the PS5, which is only going to be good for consumers. But
Yeah.
I think for me, the PS5 Pro, um, if this is seemingly what it's going to offer, is not going to be enough. I think games are still going to be CPU limited, and the majority of games are going to be CPU limited. So we're probably going to see games still running at 30 FPS or 60 FPS at most. Maybe it can run at 60 FPS, and its internal resolution is now 1080p, and it can use the PSSR stuff to upscale it to 4K, which the PS5 can't do because it doesn't have that machine learning silicon in there. But I don't necessarily think that that's really a big enough reason for me to upgrade.
Hmm. We've seen we've got a game coming out this week, big game Dragon's Dogma 2, that is targeting 30 FPS on console, not locked targeting, and it could go over, could go under, whatever. And I think that's probably a for me. I think even on PC, there's no guarantee of 60 FPS. I've just sort of put some new parts in, so I'm probably going to be okay. But even like the recommended specs, um, you're looking at 4K. They're targeting 4K 30 with that, which 4K for a lot of PC gamers, I know that 1080p, 1440p are still sort of the majority of PC gamers. Um, but you are seeing that there are games that are struggling with the current hardware. Completely forgot where I was going with this. I'm just
I
talking
but I
about
can't
PC
believe
now,
that
but
I can't believe that that's gonna be struggling with the hardware on the GPU side. It's gotta be struggling
no.
with the hardware on the CPU side. I mean, we even saw that with Elden Ring, that struggled with the hardware on the CPU side.
Mhm.
Um, and thankfully, VRR can smooth a lot of that stuff out when it's targeting 30 or targeting 60, and you can't quite get there. It can smooth things out.
Mhm.
But I don't think, if you have a PS5 Pro and it's got a little bit more horsepower and it can stabilize it anyway, why are you going to be buying a PS5 Pro to do that? You've probably already got a VRR display if you're looking for one that can run it at 120 hertz anyway.
Yeah, I think what I'm thinking about more and more as we talk about this is it reminds me of the marketing beats around the PS4 Pro where they were kind of like, "Oh, well, you don't need one." It's like you don't need to upgrade, right? Like upgrading is like a thing that like if you feel like you'll benefit from it, great, and if not, good. Like the base unit is still that's why we still sell it, right?
But
Um,
why do I feel like I'm gonna benefit from it? I think that is an important thing in terms of marketing that they need to get across. They need to
right.
show the games
Well,
running significantly better.
and what I was gonna say is like maybe they really are banking on the idea of like this is less a device that is intended for folks like us that already have a PS5 to upgrade, and it's more for people that are jumping in now to spend a little bit more on a premium unit. And I, I don't know that that makes sense because
Yeah,
to
what's
me,
the benefit for that person to go for the Pro instead of just getting the then cheaper PS5 Slim? Because the Slim's already on sale in the
yeah,
UK at the moment. They're probably trying to shift some units and make up some of that sort of like reduced targets that they were going for.
I think it depends on what the price difference is, right? Because I think it's like it's the equation of like we had the conversation with like why would you get disc versus discless, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
why would you not get the disc version? Because it's obviously an advantage to be able to play discs, right? But it's like, yeah, but if you're not going to use it and it's $50 cheaper, then that's $50 you could use on a game or something, right? And like it becomes that thing for certain people, right? Like Steve said, it's a cost benefit thing. And I think if it's a $50 price difference or $100 price difference, right? Like I think a lot of people can talk themselves into, oh, it's 45% better performance in this regard or whatever for $100. Okay. Like that's worth it. Um, I don't know. Like I could see making that decision, I guess, as a new consumer if you've got money to burn or if you get talked into the marketing of it, right? But um I
Let me
don't
tell
think
you,
it's as
PlayStation
clear
players
a
love.
I don't think it's nearly as clear a value proposition as the last one, right? Where it's like 4K is a thing. If you have a 4K TV and you want to take advantage of that, you need a PS4 Pro. And it's like, okay, like I want to get in on 4K gaming. That was a thing that made sense. Whereas this, it's just like, I don't know. Like it kind of just feels like a bump for a bump's sake rather than like it being a
Yeah.
significant step forward, which is, I think, that's what the last generation kinda half gen refresh consoles felt like, or like even with the Xbox One X, right? Like, it felt like, "Oh, like, this is maybe a good opportunity for you to jump in because it's better, it's more streamlined." They pulled out all the stuff that you heard about when it came out that you didn't like, and it was an kind of, an opportunity for that console to get a facelift, and it's like and the PS5 doesn't have that problem, right? Everybody wants one and it's hard to get or it has been historically, right? I
think
just don't
Not
see
for a
like
couple of years.
I just don't see what like I understand being like, hey, let's release a more powerful premium model that costs more money, right? Like on paper, that makes sense to me, but the timing of it feels odd, like to not have it alongside a big marquee title.
Yeah,
And
I mean, they've got no games, right? It's weird, but I mean, I think they need something to put out this year, and I also think it's worth remembering how long these consoles take to develop internally. I think this is probably a similar scenario to the PSVR 2, where it's like, okay, we're gonna do this, we greenlight the idea, and it's probably taken them 4 years to get this thing out the door. They probably had the concept of, well, we're gonna do a PS5 Pro, we're gonna do a mid-gen
last one worked,
refresh
right? Like, why wouldn't we
prior
do
t
another
yeah,
one?
they probably did it prior to the PS5 coming out. They're like, "Well, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna target this
Yeah.
in 4 years' time."
Mhm.
And now it's kind of come to this point, and we're still seeing games that are cross-gen, or we've only just reached the tail end of that cross-gen, and we're halfway through the PS5's life cycle, and the games that they probably had lined up for the PS5 Pro haven't come off, or they've been delayed, and there's seemingly no real need for this product. at this
But it's
point.
ready
It's
to come
very
out.
strange, but it's ready to
Yeah.
come out. Yeah, and Sony, as we've said multiple times on this podcast, is a hardware company, and they make money from hardware, and they want to sell hardware. Not
Yeah.
It's not just about selling software for them.
Mhm.
That's
Whereas
why since the
Xbox
last
and Microsoft, they are primarily, I think, a software company, and they're shifting towards let's have a platform, let's play those games anywhere. And the box is just another way for you to play those games. And we've seen Phil Spencer come out and say, I think it was in the FTC hearing, that they're not bothering with the mid-gen refresh this time around. They're not bothering with that Pro version, that Xbox One X version. They're just going to do the the kind of version that we've seen, the adorably all digital version that's been leaked, and I would imagine that'll come out later this year. And if that comes out and it's a significantly cheaper product versus the PS5 Pro or versus the product that they've got out currently, it may be a winner for them, especially when they've got new games like Indiana Jones coming out and PlayStation's got nothing.
I think it's also, in the context of the conversation that we've been having the last couple like weeks, months on the show, right? About how margins for AAA games are getting tighter, right? And we're needing to find ways to cut costs. And you look at the success of a game like Helldivers, right? Which is like a $40 game, and it, is not a game that's pushing graphical fidelity or any of those things as a selling point. It's just a really fun game that is at an attractive price point. And I think looking at something like that and seeing, you know, that that's a path to success, I don't know. I guess it's interesting because, like, I wonder if the next couple years we might kind of see us moving away from pushing fidelity and graphics and those things as like the end all be all, right? And like that has been a major, Max brought up all these different promises that were made, right? With both, current gen consoles, but um about hitting these certain benchmarks and how it's kind of struggled to do so. And the reality being that like even the games that like are more performant, like is that really does that matter that much? It's a cool thing in a trailer. It's a cool thing in, in to talk about in marketing beats, I guess. But like, games sell because they're good or because they're fun to play more than anything, and like looking good and performing well are important to a degree, but like they're also not sometimes, right? Like I mean, how many examples are there of game like I mean, you look at like PUBG, right? That like kicked off the battle royale craze. Like that was a game that did not run that well and did not look good, but it was fun. So you played it and you bought it.
it ran well, it just looked shit. I do think that
When
with
it
the
first came
graphics
out, it
and
did not run
performance
well.
I didn't run too, but no, I had it on my sort of rubbish computer and it was fine. Maybe on console it wasn't great when it came to
Well, I mean,
Xbox, but I'm pretty sure
I
on
was playing it on PC. I'm talking
oh,
about at
okay.
launch when it was like the game would regularly just wig
Okay.
out, and it doesn't matter. It's fine.
Well, I think that it's I do think that visuals and performance are two very different things. I don't think that performance is a graphics conversation.
No,
Um,
not at all.
because art style, yada yada yada. But I do think that games don't have to look photorealistic. They don't have to look um, incredible, and they don't have to have all of these extra features. And I think that a lot of the time, game developers seem to focus on that over performance, especially on the consoles. Don't know, I'm not sure why that is, but I guess that's because it's like you say, it's easier for marketing to go look at this screenshot, look at this video of the game running. But I do disagree that I do think that if a game is great and you are playing a game and you are sort of experiencing it on this sort of high end hardware, these are supposed to be like this is for the players. This is the best piece of hardware. We're doing this, and this. But you're still playing it at 30 FPS, or you're still playing it and it's sort of shoddy, or there's like pop in and stuff like that. It does take you out of the experience. It does. Experience is basically the entire point of a video game is to experience something,
Mhm.
and if that is being hampered by a frame rate that jumps up every now and again, or a textures that don't load in properly or stuff like that, that is a problem. And I do agree with you that graphics don't make games, gameplay makes games. Look at us talking about Balatro every fucking week for the last sort of 3 weeks because it's an incredible game, and that's one reason why you don't need a PS5 Pro because you can just play Balatro on your PS5.
Which, by the
Um,
way, Andrew Valentine wrote in to say it hit 1 million sales this week and have we played it. I don't think he listens to the Steam
he
Deck
doesn't
podcast.
doesn't have a Steam
We've
Deck.
spoken to it over there at length. If you want to hear about Balatro, go and listen to that
I just wanted to
podcast.
throw it out there because I started playing it, guys.
Good.
It's real good. It's
Of
real
Yeah.
course,
good.
it's really good. Yeah,
Right.
I know you know. You're supposed to be excited. I did what you wanted me to do.
I'm
You're
excited,
punishing the behavior you want to see,
and
Pete,
Steve.
the number
it's
one and
coming
number
to
two
mobile.
tastemakers have spoken, you know?
Okay. Yeah, this guy's telling me Wordle's one of the top 10 games of the year.
That wasn't me.
It was.
That
It
wasn't me.
was.
Yeah, okay. Didn't even come out that year.
Everyone
You
was
cheater.
playing it. Yes, it did.
Connections. Don't forget connections, Pete.
Connections was great too.
Shout out to Connect.
Maybe Pete
We
is
all
maybe
play
Steve is number 3.
Connections. What are you on about? I
We
know
do.
we do.
I do. I'm gonna do it now. No, I won't. What was I saying? I can't remember what I was saying now. Play
That
Balatro.
how much you love the PS5 Pro and that you're
Yeah,
gonna
I
buy
cannot
one
wait
at
to buy a
launch.
PS5.
Yeah.
I am. Oh, there's a point I wanted to make earlier before, but I didn't want to interrupt you fully. Was you said about Sony being a hardware company since their last big sort of new internally developed game, Spider-Man 2, we've had a new controller, 2 new headphones, the PS Portal, the PS5 Slim, and it seems like before their next big major PS5 internally developed game, we're going to have the PS5 Pro. That's crazy. Don't you think that's insane that that they've sold hardware, they're not going to release a game for it. This sounds a lot like the PSVR 2. And then they're going to release another piece of hardware for you to play those games. Like I don't know,
I
this just
think
doesn't.
I think part of the problem there though, and I think both of you are biased in an unfortunate way in the context of this year, because one of the biggest games of the year is Final Fantasy VII, and both of you are not interested in it, right? And that is a game you can
Never heard of
only
it.
play on PlayStation and like is selling really well and getting a lot of
Mhm.
attention. And I think like that's a strategy that Sony has shown they are more than happy to lean on in the past, of like, if we don't have a game, we'll make sure that there's a big game that everybody's talking about that you can only get here.
Mhm. That's a good
Is
point.
that enough reason? Like, are you gonna care if that game runs and looks a little bit better, runs at the same frame rate,
No,
now
no,
can
no, no.
run
And
at
that's the thing.
8K?
I'm making that as a separate point from the. I don't think that that increases demand for a PS5 Pro. No, I mean, like I'm right there with you. Like I don't see the demand for this product, and I think you know
Which is strange because I know how much you loved your PS4 Pro. Like you went
I
straight on
did.
ball and you were really excited about it. And like I genuinely thought you would be buzzed about the idea and the prospect of a PS5 Pro, but
I just don't think that I don't see the value prop for me, right? Because I mean on that, like I said, right? Like when I bought a PS4 Pro, I had recently gotten my first 4K television, right? So it was like a no-brainer of like, oh yeah, cool. Like I would love to play Spider-Man in 4K. I'm not gonna upgrade a console over it. And then they had the special edition, and it was like, cool, great, easy decision, right? I with this though, it's like, I mean,
So
I'm
what
not
you're saying
having
is
go ahead, go ahead.
they just need to stick a Spider-Man logo on it, and then you'll be there.
no, because you can get the Spider-Man plates for the current PlayStation
Exactly.
anyway, so who
Look,
cares?
I'm not
Alright,
saying I wouldn't be
okay.
more likely. That's this possibility, Max. I'll give you that one. But
Knowing Sony, they're gonna change the plate design. They're gonna change the shape so your
yeah,
old ones don't fit on your new one. I know they're gonna do it.
yeah,
Classic
absolutely.
Nintendo.
That said, though, like looking at this, I just I just don't see it, right? Like I don't see where there's enough of an increase in the performance to justify a switch, right? Like I'm looking at the experience I'm having right now, right? I'm playing Final Fantasy Rebirth on my base PS5, and like it looks fantastic. I'm regularly marveling at how good it looks, and I'm having no problem with, frame drops. I'm having no problem with loading or anything like that. So it's like, what am I paying for there, right? Whereas like PS4 Pro, I mean, like aside from the obvious performance increases that we were talking about, it also like it ran better and it was faster and it was quieter, and like those were all little cost of quality of life things that to me are a big part of why I do or don't make an upgrade, right? When it comes to like a console refresh, it's like a better X or Y is great, but if it's not something that every time I sit down and use it, I don't notice that change,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, what am I? You're
Yeah,
paying
like
for it just to do it, which
I
for some folks is fine, but I'd rather spend that money on a game.
I think I'd rather them, invested in features that I feel like would be beneficial to me, like quick resume, frame
Mhm.
rate boost, the auto HDR, backwards compatibility, all those things that I enjoy on the Xbox side of things that would be great on the PS5. I'm curious though, what would be the price point that would make you jump? Because Richard, in his article at Digital Foundry, seemingly thinks this is going to be $200 more expensive than the current PS5, which is $399. And then you add the detachable disk drive. He thinks it's going to be at least $599. And then you add the
What?
disk drive on top.
And that's
Where's the
that's
benefit?
American, to be clear, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's nothing, right? Like for what this is, nothing. No amount would be enough because I just don't need it. Like like if there was like a program, right, where Sony's like, hey, give us your base, and for $50 or something like that, I could upgrade. Sure, I guess maybe, but the idea that I'm gonna have to either just eat that upgrade cost, right? Which is like what I did when I bought like the OLED Switch. I didn't sell my Switch. I just kept my launch Switch. I kept my launch Steam Deck when I bought an OLED Steam Deck. Um, I have no use for two PS5s, right? And like I, the idea that I would just buy one for no reason is like no. So I would have to go through the trouble of getting external hard drive, right? Or no, I guess I could. I could put everything in the cloud. But yeah, selling my base PS5, buying a new one, and then paying whatever that cost differential is. And it's like, say it's best case scenario, and I sell my PS5 for like close to what it cost at launch. I'm still looking at an upgrade cost of $200 to $300 for
For what?
what? For what? For what amounts to a 10% increase?
45% GPU, don't forget.
Yeah, okay, but, like,
Plus
what is that?
PSSR and it potentially, running the games at solid 4K. They look sharper, they look nicer,
Yeah, but
better
I'm not having
ray
that
tracing
problem.
maybe.
Like, it's like, I don't know, dude, like, if I was that much of a resolution person, I'd be playing on PC. Like, I care about it looking good, but, like, I'm playing on a 4K resolution, and it looks like 4K, right? Like maybe it's not. Maybe it's 440 and it's upscaled and it's whatever, but like that is imperceptible to the average player. And like I'm not the average player and it's imperceptible to me. And I know the difference between looking on uh like I've played on a shit 4K TV that doesn't have HDR and been like this looks like garbage, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like I don't care about it at all. I own a very expensive television and I have high
Bragging.
quality HDMIs and all that. Like I did all that
Ooh.
nonsense to have the best performance I could get, and it's pretty damn good, right? Like I don't feel like I need an extra whatever, even 45% of like of what of a slightly clearer resolution when it already looks like crystal clear to me. It's like I don't know, man. I just don't see it.
Well, now Pete spent a lot of time talking and bragging about all of his lovely things.
Thanks
That's
to your
that's
support over on
yeah.
Patreon.com.
I I
Did it for the people, Max.
two
Steve and I were getting new next gen consoles, and we're like, we're gonna hold hands and buy way too expensive TVs, right? Let's do it.
yeah.
We did it. It was great.
I'm someone who plays most of my stuff in 1440. My screen's 1440. I put 40. I then stream it in 1440p to my TV.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's fine because then I can get the balance there of it looks incredible. I can have it at max settings. I don't have to have it in 4K to have all of that. And I think that it took Sony too long to sort of support 1440p. I understand that a lot of TVs probably don't do that, and that it is an awkward, it's not a perfect fit sometimes or
I think
whatever.
it's a
But
television problem, yeah, more
yes,
than
yeah,
anything.
I think so, I do think that it's fine and good to run things in 1440p, or even just like with upscaling. That's fine as long as it looks good, because we have seen issues with FSR in the past and DLSS where like there is ghosting and things like that, and that can take you sort of out of that experience.
We've got a lot more PlayStation conversation ahead of us in just a second, but before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of March. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go above and beyond and show your support just like they did, you can head over to flipscreen.games and find links to all the places we are all over the web, including our Patreon, where you can go and get a bunch of cool perks and goodies, including early access to the show. However you choose to get involved or show your support in the community, you can head over to flipscreen.games to get involved, whether that's joining the Discord to keep the conversation rolling, whether that's writing in with a main topic, whether that's commenting on this or any other episode of the show. We thank you for being a member of the community and for tuning in to another episode of the show.
So for running 1440p on a TV shouldn't be an issue anyway. It's 1.5 times up to 2160, which is 4K. So it was really only the resolution, like outputting to 1440p displays, that was the issue for PlayStation 5. And you never find a 1440p TV that's just monitors, so it shouldn't have never been a problem. Um, Seemingly now they'll use PSSR to do the internal
Yeah.
resolution at less and then scale it up. I could see that this may be a knock-on effect for PS5 games, that if developers now just start targeting 1080p as the bottom end resolution, a PS5 user, all you're gonna get output is a 1080p display that's then upscaled by the PS5 to output to 4K,
Mhm.
whereas the PS5 Pro will get that super resolutioned up version that gets then outputs that looks nice.
That feels a little bit like they're making the PS5 experience worse. I know that's not like an intentional decision by Sony or the developers, but if that's the way it's gonna be and they're gonna start using this PSSR to upscale from 1080p and therefore just do 1080p, it feels like PS5 users are then getting a worse deal than they were before, right? Which
I feel like if it
doesn't sound
comes to
great to
that,
me.
you'll probably be in a position where you have to make two versions, right? And you
Mhm.
have one that targets for PS5 and one that targets for the Pro. Because it's, I mean, that's
Maybe
not
first party
dissimilar.
studios do, but I could see someone like, Ubisoft or EA just being like, "Oh, this is what we're doing. We're
Right, but I
Yeah.
doing
think
cheap."
in that scenario, they would probably go for the lowest common denominator, which would be PS5, right? Not the Pro. And then you're running into the situation of you're not necessarily seeing the performance increases that you want or should be seeing for those third party games if that were the case.
Mhm.
If there's enough variance there that that matters, right? Like
Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a semi-realistic concern, right? I mean, it is gonna be more work to have to do it that way.
Mhm. All I've done so far is talk negatively about, Sony and PlayStation, so I'm gonna quickly continue doing that and say that before Spider-Man came out, I was making a bit of Spider-Man 2 this is. I was making a big, having a big thought in my head about whether I even keep the PS5 or sell it. You know, I've my setup at the moment is I've got my PC up here, I've got my Steam Deck downstairs, I can stream the 2 between them, I played a lot on the Switch, and I was like, "I'm gonna hold out because Spider-Man 2 is coming out, that's gonna be incredible." Didn't really hit for me. I was like, "Well, I'll hold on to it anyway because we've got other things coming out." Since then, we haven't had anything really coming out, and it's not like there's anything on the horizon for me that's coming out, so I'm still considering selling it. However, or not, maybe not selling it, but sort of getting rid of it or replacing it with something else, I don't know. However, I think the fact that there's a Pro coming out almost makes me more likely to do it immediately because surely, like, as a base PS5 user, I'm still gonna get more value and more use out of my PC now forever because so when the PS5 came out, I was already sort of a PC gamer. I played a lot of stuff on PC. I then sort of pivoted heavy into the PS5 because they were sort of front loading this release schedule, and there was a lot of cool stuff coming out. And I was like, yeah, cool. And I started playing third party stuff on the PS5 because it's what I was playing at the time. However, I hadn't turned it on the whole time between God of War and Spider Man. I haven't turned it on since Spider Man. And maybe I'll go back to Elden Ring on it instead of playing it on PC. Um, but I just don't, me personally, see. I know I said this at the very at the beginning of the show. I just don't see me ever picking up a PlayStation again with what they've currently got announced or what we know about, and I can't
Real shame.
imagine. Yeah, I think so too because I was
Yeah.
so it was my first PlayStation. It was my sort of first, other than Nintendo consoles, it was my first console that I'd bought. It was like a next gen console. It was brand new. I got it on launch. I was sort of part of it. I was really hyped. I loved Demon Souls. I loved playing Spider Man and Miles Morales for the first time. I loved playing Returnal. That was great. And then I started playing all the PS5 exclusives I haven't played before. God of War, one of my favorite games of all time now. Um, I was able to replay some things that I'd played before, in different ways. Yeah, I just feel like I've been a bit not scorned because or like burned because it's like, but I just feel like as an early adopter, I've not had that with the Switch. I've not had that with sort of any other console I've ever owned. Even the Wii U, I still feel like I got more value out of my Wii U in the lifespan of that console when I got to it a year late than I did um,
You
from
just
how done
loved Amiibo Festival so
This is
much. You
I was such a huge Amiibo Festival guy.
real quick. This is like exactly what I've been saying to you for a long time, Steve, about why I think it's potentially dangerous to put PlayStation games on PC. Like this is
I
exclusive
mean, it maybe,
because
yeah,
like
but
I gotta be honest with you, like, and like I don't mean this. If you feel that way, Max, that's what's important. And if these games were not available on PC in theory, you wouldn't feel that way because
like, but I don't think Max would then. Maybe I'm putting words in his mouth. I also don't think Max would give a shit about the PS5 Pro. Then still, 10%
I'm not
boost on
talking
the
about the
CPU
PS5 Pro.
side.
He's talking
Yeah,
about right now, like PlayStation as a whole, and that like their offerings
Yeah.
are not keeping him engaged, and like that's a
Mhm.
totally fair comment, right? And I know that there are multiple PS5 exclusives, right? That Max played there that he thinks are great games. Like you just said, Ragnarok, one of your favorite games of all time. Is there a game on the Wii U that's one of your favorite games of all time?
Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is pretty fucking excellent, I will say. Wind Waker's on there. I know it's a HD remaster, but it's on there.
Doesn't count.
Uh,
Prime
oh,
Trilogy. You
well,
can play that.
that was a Wii game, not a Wii U game.
You could play it there still. Yeah.
I'm sure if I had to think about it, there's probably some. But I think Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze for me is like a 10 out of 10 game.
Okay,
That is a fantastic game.
fine, fair enough. But again, so if
But also, sorry, I was talking about God of War, not God of War Ragnarok. So that's a
okay,
PS4 game, not the PS5 game. Just to clarify that.
fair enough, fair enough. Even so,
Good
right?
point. Yeah,
It's
sorry.
like there are at least, right? I think by most people's estimations, probably 2 to 3 big PS5 games that are great, but they're available
Mhm.
on 1 or 2 other platforms. And as a result, there is this perception of like, well, then they don't count. And it's like,
I don't agree with that myself because I was always people always used to people when the Switch first came out that didn't want to admit that Nintendo were a success for once would say,
uh-huh.
"Oh, well," didn't wanna say they would say, "Oh, Breath of the Wild doesn't count as a Switch game because it's also on Wii U." I
Right.
disagree with that, it's on both. I am not talking about this and my experience with the PS5 from perspective of someone who, "Oh, I can just play those games on PC," because I haven't played any of the PlayStation games on PC. Even the games that I think I bought 2 games. One I bought for a friend, which was God of War, but he wanted it on my account, and another one was, Horizon Zero Dawn, which I thought, right, I didn't gel with it on PS4. Can I play it on PC? The answer is no. Um, but I'm not saying this as like, well, I can just play those games on PC anyway. The point I'm making is that if I'm only playing the PlayStation because I want to play Sony's output, regardless of whether those games are on PC or not now, they're not outputting enough for me to still be engaged. Even if I sold the PS5 now, I wouldn't be like, well, I can just play those games on PC when they come out there. I'm not waiting for anything.
So I totally hear what you're saying. I think my point there was more like those I think are like I think it's very easy for you to make that argument of like, yeah, like what do I even need to hold on to it for? Right. And like that's part of it. Is like you might not be thinking about that right now because there isn't something that you're looking forward to, but say whatever, right? Like God of War 3, right, is coming out. And it's like if you know that that's not coming to PC, then I could see you at least having the mentality of like, well, I own a PS5, right? So like obviously I'll hold on to it. And when an exclusive comes out that I want to play, I'll play it there, right? And it'll be an exclusives machine. A lot of people have that relationship with their Switch, right? Like, and that's fine. But I mean, I think with where you're at right now, yeah, like I could totally see you making that decision because as long as you're literally comfortable with the idea of like if one of those games comes up, you'll play it late, then
Or you buy a used PS5 and PS5 Pro's out and it's significantly cheaper because everyone's been
yeah,
like selling them
you
off,
sell it
you
now
know?
while you'll get the maximum
Yeah.
return. Right. Yeah. And it's like I can totally see that justification, right? It's like it's less even me making commentary on like your habits specifically and more like I can see why someone who is a PC gamer that bought a PS5 at launch would be like, yeah, like what do I even
I
need
don't
this
I
for?
don't think it's just PC gamers though. Like I don't really play on PC. I play on my Steam Deck, but I also play on my Switch, play on my Xbox. I didn't turn the PlayStation on last year, really. There was
Yeah,
nothing
but
there
like
for me.
I don't think you can like judge it based on that because most people don't have 4 consoles, right?
But I
Like
think people judge
I
the
agree.
Xbox on that, and I don't think people judge the PlayStation in the same way.
because it's
Everyone's always
nobody's
like,
first
"There's no
choice. That's
games."
why though. Like
It's
and I
some
think
people's first choice.
yeah, I mean, sure, but statistically speaking, a lot less, right? Like And again, this is I'm making this argument and it always comes off like I'm fucking defending Sony, but I'm not. It's just statement of fact, right? Like PlayStation has a stronger brand than Xbox. That's why they outsell them 2 to 1. And if you only own one console, like if Max didn't own a PC at all, right? And he bought his PS5 and at launch he was like, I love this thing. I'm playing all the exclusives. I'm having a great time. That trickles. And now all that's coming out on his third party, and he doesn't own another console. Guess what? He's still playing on his PlayStation 5. And all these great games that you and I are Balatro, right? You guys love Balatro. Well, he'd be playing that on PlayStation. And then when he thinks back on this generation, that would be one of the games he associated with his PlayStation library. And
I'd be
most
playing that on
gamers
Nintendo Switch.
are like that.
Sorry, Pete.
What's that?
I'd be playing that on Nintendo Switch. I'm sorry, Pete.
If you owned a
That's a Switch.
Nintendo Switch, right?
Yeah.
I think though
Point
it
being,
doesn't take a lot for a brand to get eroded, and I
you're
think
right.
PlayStation has done a mighty job in the last 2 years of chipping away at their
Yes.
stellar
Mhm.
brand with price increases on a aging console, with doubling down on live service games that nobody wants by putting out a VR headset that seemingly nobody's buying and they paused production on this week, and not putting any games out this year.
But let me ask you this, right? Because again, like we get in these kinds of conversations all the time where it's perception versus reality. How much does that actually materially hurt them? Because yeah, they just laid a ton of people off. I'm not sitting here ignoring those facts. We have a whole episode about why those people got laid off and why it's because of changing market and like them pivoting, right? Not that the company is not doing well. They had a record high quarter at the end of last year. So
In
like,
terms of revenue, but margins were down, and that was the
yeah,
problem.
right, exactly. But again, that's what I'm saying though. Like all of those examples that you just gave, have those eroded Sony's brand in the eye of the general consumer? Are they aware that
I
the
think a
PlayStation got a
lot of
price increase? Are they aware that Sony invested a bunch of money into games that they never heard of and will never come out? No.
I think a lot of
And
people are. No, I genuinely do. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh my god, you're nickel and diming me again for another $10 for an upgrade. You're doubling the price of PlayStation Plus, and I don't really wanna pay it, so I'm gonna cancel it," you know? A lot of people are, like, seeing those
but again,
effects.
like they increased the price of PlayStation Plus and the revenue increased. So like, did that actually happen?
Subscribers
Or
dropped off though. Like, yeah, the revenue
yeah,
increased because it was more expensive, but subscribers dropped off.
yeah, but
Less people are gonna be playing
they
online
did that on
games. Fewer
purpose.
people are picking up the PS5.
But that's I mean, that's how subscription models work, right? Like you see that all the time. Like you increase like we're seeing that with like streaming services right now, right? It's like
Mhm.
you increase the price and you lose a number of subscribers, but your overall like market is healthier because you have a higher number of people who are paying more and are more engaged. And like I'm not arguing that that's like a good thing for consumers or that like they're right for doing that. I agree with you that there are a laundry list of huge mistakes. It's been every episode for this whole like month has been how they've been making mistakes. I'm sitting here saying that I think the PS5 Pro is a mistake. And there has not really been a big material impact on them for any of those mistakes
I
in a
think we're
way
gonna
that
see a
is
material impact this
objective and
year.
tangible.
I think objective and tangible this year is gonna be we did not make very much money versus the last year. We did not put out enough first party software to
Mhm.
make enough money. We had
Yeah.
studio closures, the PSVR 2 was a disaster, and we're gonna have to try and claw back as much as we can, which is why we've started laying people off. And that's not a good look for anyone. And I think it just kind of reeks of desperation and trying to steer a very big ship very quickly when the CEO has been ousted and they've
Mhm.
got nobody lined up to replace him. We still don't have a replacement. They've just got an interim CEO. Who's going to take over and what's their vision? I don't think PlayStation has one right now. And they're just sticking with Jim Ryan's plan while he's out the door. It's like, oh, well, we better put the PS5 Pro out because he worked on that and we've got it ready. We better
Mhm.
put out these live service games or cancel the ones that aren't too far down the line, but we'll put out the other ones anyway and we'll kind of get that going. Their
Mhm.
acquisition of Bungie's a mess. There's leadership changes there this week as well. Like nothing is seemingly going right at PlayStation.
I know.
And
And yet I do think that people are just if this was Xbox, we would have droves and droves of people just like laying into him, talking about how Xbox is doomed. Even when Xbox did a thing that PlayStation was doing, which is take their top stuff, put it on another, not even their top stuff. Some of their games on another platform, it was all Xbox is doomed, Xbox is finished. But as soon as PlayStation put their games on PC, it's oh, what a great business move that people have already played those games on PlayStation. Now they can make more
I
money
mean,
off of them. I
there were
do
plenty
think
of
there
people
is a
who made
disconnect.
that same argument at that time, though. Like I think there was that hand wringing, but also I think like there, I do think it's funny when we get in these conversations and it's like, oh well, if it was Xbox, yeah, but it's like Xbox is number 3.
Mhm.
Like it's like, and that matters, and it's like you can't judge them all equally because they're not equal. Like Xbox
That's fair.
is the least successful of these 3 companies by a wide margin, and they have been for 2 generations now, right? Like we know, and we don't know the exact number because Xbox doesn't talk about it, but we've had other companies talk about the number of next gen consoles that have been sold, and we know how many PlayStations have been sold. So we know that Xbox is a distant third. They admitted it in court. So I do think it's easy to look at the narrative of you're in third place and now you're putting your exclusive software that you spent all this money on other platforms and be like, they're waving the white flag. And I think
Mhm.
we talked to death about why that's not what they're doing, but I get that narrative in the same way
Mhm.
that I think it's the same. It's the point I'm making right now, right? Which is like, I don't think any of these decisions are good. I don't think any of the things that Sony has done in the last at least 2 years, we'll say, right? Aside from releasing Spider-Man 2 and locking down Final Fantasy as exclusives, right? Pretty much exclusively decisions that we have criticized them or at least questioned, right? Significantly. That said, they're still winning. The console is still selling exceptionally well. And we can sit here and say there's not enough games on it. Yeah, but so many people only own one console or they only own one home console, right? Maybe they own a Switch as well. Maybe they play things on PC as well. But a lot of gamers own one box and it's a PlayStation. And it doesn't matter that the next God of War is however many years away or the next Spider-Man is, but it's because it's like they played whatever one they were going to play. And then in the time in between, they played Assassin's Creed and FIFA and Fortnite and maybe Balatro and all these other games that are just coming out
Better
on the
do.
platform that they engage in the same way that Max said when he was playing his PS5, he started just buying third-party games there because that's where he was playing. And it's just like that's how more people are than not, right? More people are that way than they are I'm on every platform and I'm always seeking out the best titles and the best deal and the best performance. And it's like that is a less common way to engage. And I think that for those people where the PlayStation 5 is the only thing that they bought, like are they complaining? Because it doesn't seem like it. They seem pretty satisfied, right? And I think that like I'm with you though, Steve, that like I think that Sony is cashing in on the strength of their brand a lot lately. And there is going to come there may come a point where that doesn't work for them anymore, right? But like
They're like 2 or 3 bad releases away from people just going, "Ugh, like, really? Another crap Sony move? Like, really?
yeah.
Great."
But
I
again, it's like
really
I do think that's a strength of theirs is that the software hasn't been bad. When's the last time that they released a first party game that underperformed? It's like Days Gone.
yeah, maybe, yeah.
And that's
I
a
mean,
cult hit,
some of the
right?
third party exclusives that they bet on though have been really bad. Like you say that that's their strategy, but you look at some of the stuff like Babylon's Fall. Like what a great move that was, you know?
Sure. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that they always hit, but it's like the marquee titles have, right? God of War was a success. Horizon was a success. Spider-Man was a success. If that's what you're showing up for, and in the in between of those, you're happy to just play whatever's coming out that you could get on any other platform, then it's like, does that matter? Is that not enough for you? Because it's like, I don't know, right? Like, how many people are really like dying to play that many? Like, a lot of people play a couple live service games, and then they play 1 or 2 big single player games a year,
And
like,
that's the
it's
problem. Yeah, yeah. I think I agree with you, but if JRPG's not your jam this year, you're kind of screwed on the PlayStation front. And I get
sure.
Max's complaint there. It's like, well, What do I really play?
Yeah,
And like,
that's
you
totally
you
fair.
might keep playing Fortnite. What is bringing me and driving me to buying a $600 or $700 console this holiday season when I could probably look over the fence and I've already got a PlayStation and I go, well, Xbox has just released their new console. It's cheaper because it doesn't have a disc drive now, but I don't really care about a disc drive because it's got Game Pass
There's also a
and
new
they've just
Nintendo
released
console coming out
yeah,
seemingly in the
exactly, and
next
they've
12 months, right?
just released the new Indiana Jones game, and it looks really great, and I'm excited about that. And we've got all of these other new titles that are coming that are exclusive to Xbox and exclusive to Switch. Why would I not this holiday season pick one of those up instead of a PS5 Pro? And I think that's a more likely scenario.
That takes us back to the top, man. I don't know. I can't rationalize that as a choice unless you have a level of expendable income where it just doesn't matter, right? And then, like, fair enough. You're gonna buy whatever you're gonna buy. Cool. And there are some people that are like diehard Sony ponies, right? So like they'll just do that because yeah, why not, right? That said, I don't know how many people that is. I don't think that's a lot of people that are just gonna drop $600 on an upgrade that feels superfluous when there is a new console coming out in a couple months that you might want to pick up, or there's increased competition everywhere else. Um, because like I I think for the folks that are in, right, like fair enough, right? Like, I think there is probably an assumption that a certain percentage of those people are going to upgrade. I wouldn't be surprised if whatever that estimate is too much, and that there of the people that already own PS5s, there's really not a huge desire for an upgrade for a console that they feel like maybe they've not really gotten their mileage out of yet, right? Um,
Mhm.
it as a value prop for new buyers, sure, but I, I don't know.
I don't know. I can't see it for a current PlayStation owner, especially imagine if you really are that big Sony fan, you went and bought PSVR 2, you spent $600 on a PSVR 2, you played one game, and they put nothing else out. And now you're left thinking, "Well, I don't really wanna play Final Fantasy this year," and you've got nothing else first party or really exciting on the horizon for the PS5. Why would I then spend another $600 with a company that's just burnt me with the PSVR 2 to buy another console, another piece of hardware for more promises that aren't coming to fruition? I can't see it. I really cannot.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the position that they find themselves in at this point, right? Where it's like I I think you're probably right that the console is ready to come out, and they thought that things were going to line up differently, right? Because the last couple years have been tumultuous, right? Global pandemic fucked everything up, right? And like timing for a lot of things has been thrown off. So the idea that like this is just a product that was planned to be ready and maybe they thought it would be ready sooner and it would launch alongside something like Spider-Man, or that there would be another big game out this year to kind of be the hot thing to go with it or whatever, right? Maybe so, but yeah, I
I
mean, to
didn't
me,
even
I don't
consider
know if
that.
there's any other. Oh yeah.
I didn't even consider that they don't have a new like a big marquee game to come out with it that isn't gonna end up being a remake or a re-release of something that's already on the PS5. That just never entered my mind at any point that they would have to just sell this as is, like they did with the Slim. But even then, they had Spider-Man with the Slim. But yeah, didn't even consider that they've already said nothing. Don't expect big new games from us, and now they're putting out
From
big new
existing
hardware.
franchises, because it's possible that
True.
there's something else, right? Like a new IP or something like that. Like that's literally possible. But
We know that Sony likes to sort of lead its new IP with like a while. You know, Horizon Zero Dawn took a couple of years of seeing
right.
it. Even the revival of God of War, which that's a prospect there. You'd have to sort of show that took two E3s maybe to show off and sort of
Mhm.
lay down the groundwork for it. I don't see how they go. Here's a big enough new IP that's launching inside your PS5 Pro that's going to get people jazzed enough to go. I want to play this game the best I can, even if they were to do like, oh, a Bloodborne remaster, right? That is a game people have been waiting for forever, but it is still a niche game. And I don't think that you could, unless it's I don't know, unless it's Bloodborne 2 out of nowhere, let's say, and it's like, "Whoa, like, this is a
Even
brand
so,
new
though,
thing," I
it's
can
like,
see that.
how many people would just be like, "Yeah, cool, great, I'll play it on my PS5." Like, I don't that doesn't
Yeah.
mean I need to upgrade
Yeah.
my console for it, you know? And
Yeah.
I just don't think I don't think you have that, you know,
Mhm.
at all. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'll be interested to see what the end of this year looks like because I think that Steve, like, you make I think a strong point of the idea of like, you know, are we gonna get to a point at the end of this year where it's like, hey, Sony had nothing to show, right? And they had no like um big marquee title to sell. They had no, you know, like good hook for new people, and it is just like selling to the folks that are already in the audience. Um, I really wonder what that actually looks like because, you know, I don't think you can discount the popularity of Final Fantasy, right? Like FF7 is a big release and I'm sure will sell really well and will drive consoles and everything, right? Like throughout the year. Um and maybe that's enough. And if we get to the end of the year and that's what it looks like, then I think maybe it just speaks to how strong the brand is and how much runway they have to make mistakes before it becomes a problem, right? Um, but I think it's equally likely, if not far more likely, that we get to that point at the end of the year and it's like, oof, like, down year for Sony and the first in a long time, right? And even that is
Yeah.
not going to sink them, right? They have, you know, um, a lot of consoles sold. They have a big install base. All it takes is a good year to turn fortunes, right? But yeah, man. I mean, it's
I,
uh,
for one, am looking forward to picking a PSVR 2 up for like $100 when they inevitably go on clearance and using it with my PC later this year. Like, yeah, that's what I'm excited about from Sony this year.
that's something, I guess. More
Yeah,
than I've got.
it's gonna be a weird year where Xbox has potentially put more games on PlayStation than PlayStation's put on PlayStation. And that's just bizarre because
What a
Hi-Fi Rush
headline.
came out today. Sea of Thieves, we spoke about last week, was the top pre-ordered game on PlayStation. It beat out, a bunch of other titles. So, it could be that it's Xbox's
Sentiment's
year
been
on
out already.
PlayStation.
That is funny. That is, yeah.
It'd be a hell of a headline at the end of the year, right? It's like Xbox publishes more games on PlayStation than PlayStation and is still in third place. There are no winners this year, only losers.
I think it depends what you track that metric by at this point. Are you in third place because you sell the least consoles? If that's not your strategy to sell consoles anymore, how do you track that metric? Is it the number of games that you sell? Because if
Yeah.
you're putting more games out, you're selling more games. And if PlayStation ain't putting any out, they ain't selling any.
That's not true. What do you mean? Like they put out games that don't sell well because they're on Game Pass. Think about like how many copies like Helldivers sold this year. Like Helldivers is a huge hit. Like that could easily outsell 2 or 3 games that Xbox puts out.
Mhm. I mean, on PlayStation, like they're selling the games on PlayStation. So,
Oh,
you know,
from Xbox.
yeah.
Okay, sure. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's guaranteed that those 4 games will sell. Maybe Sea of
No, but
Thieves.
it's those games, all of the Activision Blizzard games,
Sure.
potentially Bethesda games. There's a lot of stuff that's,
Yeah.
coming
Yeah,
out
yeah.
of Microsoft
Good
now.
point. Good point. Yeah, I guess that's an interesting question, right? Of like, how do you judge who's winning the race when they're doing different things? Um,
Mhm. Like, because we could never really track against Nintendo because they were always in that, like, mid-generation. It was like, they'd come
Mhm.
out a little bit in between.
yeah, I mean, you can track how many like units the thing like the Switch is, it's incredibly successful, right? Like and I think the tough thing with Xbox is that like you can measure how many people are subscribed to Game Pass and how much money it's making a year and everything like that, but it's like, I mean, that is such an interesting one for me because it's like, sure, but we also invested how many billions of dollars to create that library, right? It's
Mhm.
like it's starting from a place of like if we're not, you know, if we're trying to judge everybody on equal footing, then it's like, okay, sure, like there are probably several metrics by which Xbox is not in third place, but it's like, how much money has Xbox made versus how much it's spent to claw a losing position, right? Like they themselves called themselves third place in the market, right? Under
Yeah, I
under
mean, they
penalty of
really only did
perjury.
that. They only really did that so that they could get the deal through. But yeah, I take your point. I mean,
I
it's
think
gonna be
it's true
interesting.
though,
I
right? Like,
I I'm really interested to see what Xbox's kind of retort and response to this is. Do they go with the mid-gen refresh? There was that thing this week where a new Xbox development kit went through FCC, so potentially
oh, I
that's
didn't
being
see that.
shown off.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's potentially being shown off at GDC right now behind closed doors to developers. So it's possible that there's going to be some leaks from the Xbox camp as well. Um, we'll have to
Well,
wait and see. That could be a handheld though. We don't know. We don't know what Xbox is kind of working on. I'd love to see them really do different things at this point. I think it makes it more exciting when it's not just the same box versus
they
the same box.
they did have that thing that we were talking about where Phil was talking about like them wanting to explore like different types of hardware and like things that you interact with in different ways. There's conversation about a handheld, like all that kind of stuff. I wonder if it's maybe something like that, even right? Because like that could be interesting. I don't know that I would expect to see them respond, just because I mean, like I feel like they very much have the party line's been consistent of like, yeah, like we're not winning on the box front, so it's fine, right? Like that's not what we're trying to do anymore. It's like
I do
why
Yeah, but
think
bother?
doesn't
that
that then hamper your marketing? You know, when it's like, because that was the big thing last generation. It was Xbox One X is the most powerful console in the world. This is how we're going to get gamers back. If you're not that anymore, and the PS5 Pro is the most powerful console in the world,
Yeah,
how do you kind of entice more people to come to your platform? Is it a value proposition of we've got all of these games and Game Pass, and this is why you come here now?
I mean, yeah, probably, right? Like I think you focus on services and like that's your unique differentiator in the same way that the most powerful box used to be, right? I don't know.
I I think if the most powerful having the most powerful box was important to Xbox anymore, they wouldn't have released the Series S, which because the Series S is cheaper, this is weaker, but it does have Game Pass, so buy it alongside your PlayStation. Like they clearly want people to not necessarily own their boxes, but own Game Pass. We know that. I'm saying the most obvious thing in the world here, but I like what Steve said. It's interesting when it's not just box versus box, when it is all three of these services do different. All three of these companies are doing different things. There's value to each one. There's sort of it's more interesting, I think. So
Definitely. Yeah. So we'll see. I think right now it's the fact that both of them are in a state of flux is very interesting. And like the we're in a volatile point for the market and for the industry in general that like this is when you're going to see them get creative and try new things or not, right? And really try to like stay the course and you know it's interesting to kind of see PlayStation feel like they're doing both of those things, but they're doing like the worst version of both of them. They're trying new things that are weird and they're being safe in places that feel
Mhm.
disappointing. It's tough. But we'll leave it there for
Bef-
today. I'm interested to
Before we
hear. Oh,
go, I
go
just want to
ahead.
correct. It was in South Korea that the Xbox development kit was certified, not the
There you go.
FCC. So, but there's
You.
something coming out. We're gonna see something new.
Thank you guys for joining us here on another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. Remember, if you want to write in with your thoughts on this, I'd like to hear them. You can hit us up at flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can be a part of the question block. You can write in with the main topic, or you can write in about this or any of the other stories we've discussed here on the show. What do you think about the current state of PlayStation? And are you interested in a PS5 Pro? Is that something that like, are we missing the mark? Is there something here that you see for yourself as the Sony pony that you are? And please
Hmm.
explain. We'd love to hear it. However you choose to get involved, write in, join the community over on Discord, keep the conversation rolling. Go over to Patreon, show your support, go above and beyond, get a bunch of perks and goodies. However you choose to get involved, again, that's flipscreen.games, where you can go and find links to all that and much more. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of the show. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. He's been Max. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.